Guys, I was on a different podcast a couple days ago. It's called The Red Shirt Sophomore. It's an up-and-coming podcast by a couple of dudes. One's an Aggie, one's a Minnesota Gopher. They have great perspective of the national landscape of college football. They know their stuff. I recommend checking them out. I'll post a link to that show when it drops tomorrow. They asked me to come on and talk about what Elko's done so far with his staff and the portal acquisitions, keeping this class together as well as it can. Of course, there's another big name coming up we're all going to wait for next week for signing day. But after talking about some of these names, some of the stuff Elko's done in short order, I wanted to reflect. It's been a crazy 2 months, man. It was just over 2 months ago we were square in the Jimbo Fisher era, thinking about how this team's going to improve, wondering if Jimbo had what it took with this team or his team when he was still here to actually make some noise in 2024, which of course was a year that we had circled based on that 2022 class growing up, becoming juniors, and knowing that the schedule doesn't feature Bama, Georgia, Ole Miss, who's good now, Tennessee, who's good, manageable schedule, good roster, but could Jimbo do it? That's where we were a couple of months ago. Jimbo gets fired. I thought that Jimbo would have another year. I thought for sure that Jimbo was going to be around until 25-ish, the start of the year 25, end of the year 24, if things were going to go that route. They got rid of him early. So since 2022, we had kind of been feeling like things were shaky. We were thinking, man, is this not going to work out with Jimbo? Things looked so good the first 3 years. All of a sudden, things aren't looking so good. We start thinking about, like, what are the next steps? What are the moves? Like I said, I'm thinking Jimbo's here for a couple more years. Meanwhile, Mike Elko is off to an amazing start at Duke. And since the 2022 season started, well, the App State game, if it was on your bingo card for me to mention App State tonight, congrats. I hate it. I mentioned it. Yeah, App State. From that point forward, I was thinking it's a damn shame that I don't think Mike Elko's timeline is going to line up with when Jimbo would potentially be fired. Because like I said, I thought Jimbo would be around through 25 at least. I thought Elko was going to be the hottest name in the coaching market. I thought he was going to be like the Kalen DeBoer name after a couple of years at Duke, or like Brian Kelly leaving Cincinnati, or like whoever went from a mid-level, mid-high level program to the next like top-tier program, like Kelly to Notre Dame, DeBoer to Bama, Fickle to Wisconsin, I guess, something like that. I was like, oh, it's not going to line up. I really want Elko. What he did at A&M was amazing as the coordinator. The way players talked about him, the players he put in the league, was so high on Elko through all of 2022. But I didn't think it was going to happen because I thought Jimbo was going to stick around for a while. Then 2023, obviously shaky year. Not as terrible as 2022, but it definitely didn't make us feel any better after 2022, if that makes sense. I, again, did not think Jimbo would be gone. I thought he'd be here through the end of the year. He gets fired after Mississippi State. You guys remember, we all know. The coaching search begins. All these names enter the chat. You know, we had the Kalen DeBoer was like the dream. Jeff Traylor's name entered. A bunch of other names. I make videos on YouTube, so I'm like Urban Meyer or Lane Kiffin just to put the dialogue out there, just to get crazy. I have to get crazy sometimes when I'm doing this stuff. The name Mike Elko, you may have heard me say this before, at that time, kind of soured, kind of got stale. I guess I got shiny object syndrome. I wanted the next shiny name, the next big name. And I didn't think it was Elko. I wasn't opposed to Elko, but I definitely had shiny object syndrome looking elsewhere. The weeks go on. It turned out A&M didn't really have a direct plan. I guess the plan was to get a jump on the market, get rid of Jimbo a couple of weeks before the season starts ending. So as soon as the season ends, the regular season ends, you're knocking on the doorstep of whichever coach you want to talk to. And I was just not feeling Elko. I just wasn't into it. It just wasn't exciting. Then Mark Stoops happens. The Mark Stoops era begins out of nowhere. And then it ended. It lasted about 3 hours. It was done. The next day, Mike Elko. We've talked about it. The relief factor of that alone, going from Mark Stoops to Mike Elko, made the Elko hire feel that much better because it was like, it could have been this. I guess we stumbled on Mike Elko. We happened to land on it. Ross Bjork, I mean, say what you will about Ross Bjork. Now, 2 months later, in hindsight, when he said that it felt like we were stuck in mud or it felt like we were in the slow part of traffic behind a slow car, feeling what I'm feeling right now with all the acquisitions, this time of the football year anyway is crazy. Things are moving like crazy. Contrasting that to how we felt 2 months ago, I do feel like we were stuck in mud. I do feel like we were in the slow side of traffic, not moving forward, not propelling forward. Because Elko's put in some damn work, guys. In this other podcast I was doing, we talked about the staff, we talked about the players, talked about the portal players. I can only speak for myself, but I think Mike Elko has absolutely surpassed my expectations. And I don't really know exactly what I expected on paper, like signee for signee, coaching hire for coaching hire. But now as everything's coming together and we're sitting back and we're looking at it all on our notepads, all the names we had written down, all the names we acquired, all the players that have entered the program, like 40 new guys entering this program, probably more than 40 players entering the program, a whole new coaching staff. As a whole, Mike Elko did better than I thought he would have. And I had pretty high hopes based on just his track record at A&M and what he was doing at Duke, and just he was in such high regard amongst people who knew what they were talking about, if you know what I mean. So looking at this staff, and guys, check out that podcast dropping tomorrow. We go in deep on the staff, on the portal. But if you look at this staff, it is so well fleshed out, man. Every part of this staff, in my opinion, has at least a slight needle mover, at least. And when I say a needle mover, I mean improvement from before. And I think there are some guys that still need to prove themselves. There are some guys that are younger guys, maybe up-and-comers. We talked about the hungry dog. A lot of hungry dogs in the staff compared to Jimbo's previous staff. Maybe had some guys that had baggage, maybe some satisfied dogs in Jimbo. Maybe Adazio's on his way out of his career. Bobby Petrino, maybe. The players he got in the portal. I mean, you knew that this team had to go acquire some guys, because when you lose a coach, you lose players, you got to fill it out. But first of all, the quantity of guys that were gotten, how quickly it came together in this portal class, and just some of the guys at the top, like getting Nick Scorton and Des Ricks, Will Lee, Cassius Howell. Some of these guys are just really, really good and promising dudes. So I asked you guys as the show was starting, and I'm asking you again, if you could type it in chat. If you're lurking, I want to hear your opinion on this. Did Mike Elko exceed your expectations? Whatever you were expecting. Is it about what you thought? Is it even better? Is it maybe a little bit worse? Did you have really high hopes for Elko? Because damn, man, things are looking really, really promising compared to how I felt even when Jimbo was still here and we were going into next year with all that talent.